This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Bruchim Haba. Today's Shiur, I want to focus on three different subjects, all under the rubric of Klalei HaShas, Klalei HaPsak in Shas. One of them goes back to the bottom of Mem Aleph Amud Beis. One of them will be on Mem Beis Amud Beis regarding the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, and one is regarding the din of Machloikes V'Acher Kach Stam. But they're all under the general category of Klalei HaShas. Gemara on the bottom of Mem Aleph Amud Beis brought a halacha that a Yevamos for the first 3 months she's supported from the deceased's estate. From there on, she doesn't get supported not from the husband and not from the Yavam. In other words, when a woman's husband passes away, she can indefinitely be supported by her husband's estate. It says in the Ksuba that when you are an almana, you could sit in my domain and be nene from my domain forever, indefinitely. However, in a case where the husband dies and she falls to a Yavam, the estate could say, look, we gave you an alternative. And the alternative is marry the Yavam, and the Yavam will support you. So you get to be supported for 3 months, and then you fall to the Yavam, but the Yavam is not required to support you until he actually marries you. The Gemara says if he runs away, and we already sort of required him to figure out what he's doing, then you are supported from his estate. And the Gemara says, what if you fall to a Yavam Katan? Can she then turn around to the estate and say, look, you didn't give me an option here, because there's no viable Yavam here. So Gemara says, Machloikes Rav Acha and Ravina. One says she gets the money, one says she doesn't get the money. And the Gemara gives a psak, V'hilchas alesla. The halach is she doesn't get the money, Mishamaya Kansuha. The heavens have punished her. Meaning you could make the case, look, normally an almana gets to be supported indefinitely. It's only if she falls to a Yavam, it's not indefinite, but in this case she didn't really fall to a Yavam because the guy's a katan. So Gemara says no, mishamayim kansua. She doesn't get not from the Baal and not from the Yavam. Interesting, the Gemara gives a psak. So let's first start in the third Maramakam, which is Rabbi Kiva. Gemara Nafla, this is my third sheet over here. Nafla lefnei Yavam katan. Pligi bar Rav Acha Ravina, chad amar Islam azaynois menichsei abal v'chad amar lesla. V'ilchasa lesla. Ask Rabbi Kiva Eger, Kashali, lama leila mifsak al-hilchasa. Why do I need a psak over here? Ha mibalayvzeh, miklala d'cholhecha d'pliga Rav Acha Ravina, hilchasa kedivrei ha-mekel. There's a klal in Shas. Whenever Rav Acha and Ravina argue, we go with the lenient opinion. It's a klal in Shas, you should know that. Someone wakes you up in your sleep, Rav Acha and Ravina, so you should say, halacha kedivrei ha-mekel. Now, you'll say, but in this case, who's being mekel? Either way, it's a kula. If she gets the money, it's a kula for her. If the husband, if the estate has to pay, it's, in other words, if she gets the money, it's a kula for her. If she doesn't get the money, it's a kula for the Baal. So Tosfos in Baba Metzia says that if you leave the money where it is, that is considered a kula in monetary issues. We're not going to be moitzi mamon if we don't know what to do. That's considered a leniency. Kamasha Katsav the Tosfos in Parak HaShoyel, like Tosfos says in Parak HaShoyel. And the Ran says in Zbron the Beis Yosef, Uke'ein zeh kashalan. By the way, says Rabbi Kiva, the same question we could ask on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. I'm sure you all remember. The question was, even though Unit says Yibum Kaidem says Chalitza, but Achshav she'ein miskavnin l'shem mitzvah Chalitza is Kaidemes, and the Gemara says, Rav says, we don't force you to do Chalitza. And the Gemara brought a story. They came before Rav, and he said, you want to do Chalitza? You could. You want to do Yibum? You could. And even Rabbi Yehuda says we don't force, and the Gemara tells a whole story that Rabbi Yehuda made it be written in a shtar of chalitza, how Ploinus Bas Ploini came to do, brought her Yavam before us to Bezdin, and we determined that he is the brother of her deceased husband from the father. And then the Gemara brings on the first wide line, second wide line, Ishtamoidinu, what does it mean we determined? Pligi ba Rav Acha v'Ravina, Chad Amar be'edim, Chad Amar afilu karva afilu isha. One says we determined with Edim, one says even a relative, even a woman could tell us their brothers from the father. And the Gemara says, V'hilchasa, the halacha is giloi milsa ba'almahu. All we need is we don't need absolute evidence, we just need giloi milsa. V'afilu karoi, v'afilu isha. So the Gemara says that we have a machlekes Rav Acha and Ravina, and there also the Gemara comes out with a psak, and it wasn't really necessary for the Gemara to give a psak, because we should go halacha kedivrei hamekel, that you shouldn't need edus. All you should need is afilu karoiv va'afilu isha. So there too, Rabbi Kiva says we could have the same question. Why do we need to paskin halacha v'harei miklala the halacha from the klal and Shas that the halacha is like the lenient party? We would know who the halacha is like. That's Rabbi Kiva's kasha, both on Mem Aleph Amud Beis and Lamed Tes Amud Beis. Okay, good kasha, good yediyah that halacha machlokes Rav Acha and Ravina. Halacha kedivrei ha-mekel. Comes the Aruch Laner, Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, and he attempts to answer this question both on this page and on Lamed Tes Amud Beis. So he says over here, the halacha is that she does not get to be supported from the deceased estate. And so you'll say, what is considered mekel here? By the way, anybody know who came first, Rabbi Kiva or the Aruch Laner? I think most people would say Rabbi Kiva came first, and I believe the Aruch Laner came first. And Rabbi Kiva wrote footnotes on the Aruch Laner's halachos of Hilchos Sukkah, the Bikurei Yaakov. I believe they're hagois of Rabbi Kiva. Okay. In any event, the Aruch Laner asks the same kasha, and he quotes the same Tosfos that being moitzi mamon is a chumrah. So when I heard this kasha, I thought you could answer very simply, and this is the first answer of the Aruch Laner. No. If it would just leave it up to the fact that halacha kedivrei hamekel, so we'll leave the money where it is, and therefore she doesn't get a share from the deceased, well, what if she grabs a share? What if she's toifes? So then we would say, she gets to keep it, and we're not going to take it away from her, because it's maman amota b'safek, we'll leave it where it is. So we need a definitive psak that she doesn't get the money. Meaning it's not good enough just to leave it up to halacha kedivrei hamekel, because what is considered being mekel by mammon, not being moitzi mammon. But what if she did it on her own? So that's what the Aruch Laner says. The nafkamina in knowing the halacha definitively is that she doesn't get a share, is that even if she grabs a share, we take it away from her. Furthermore, says the Aruch Laner, the reason why it said the halacha is that she does not get a share, hatam delesla. It's not enough just to rely on the rule she doesn't get a share. We want to know the logic and the rationale she doesn't get a share. And the logic is, even though in general the husband took responsibility for her, but this is a set of circumstance which was dished out to her from Shamayim as a punishment. Who could know possibly that if a woman's husband dies and she falls to a Yavam Katan, that God is punishing her? We don't have, we're not authorized to make a call on the rationale and the logic of the ways of Hashem. So we need the Gemara to tell us, in other words, we need to paskin not to know what to do, but to understand why to do it, which the Gemara provides a rationale, namely, Mishamayim Kansuha. So now I want to show you the Aruch Laner and Lamed Tes Amud Beis. There also he asked the same question, Kashali Lama Lila Apsuke Hilchasa. Why do I need to paskin the halachas? All you need is even a car of even a woman. Even the klalu the b'kal magna pli Ravin Ravacha halach gamandam lekula chaygav nikshu gam atosis and chulin and the Rashba umashatir tzusham l'shayachacha. Whatever they answer there doesn't apply here. Says Achlaner ulai nakad kain. Perhaps the reason why it picked this misham the ratzal farish tam demanda amar demekel. Maybe it picked this because it wants to explain the rationale of the opinion who is lenient. Mishum the Gilui Milsav Amahu, it's just revealing the matter. Ukamasha Kasav Atoisus Bechulin, like Toisus says in Chulin, Denakad Kain, that the reason why I picked him, Mishum Shratzel Havi Meimer Rav Yosef. In other words, it seems that even though in general we could rely on the klal, that machlokes Rav Acha Ravina halacha k'divrei hamekel, but if there is some kind of side reason why we would bring a definitive psak, that would be a good enough reason to paskin. Okay, so that's the first offering. The first offering is, number one, a very important yediyah. Machlokes Rav Acha Ravina halacha k'divrei hamekel. That's Rabbi Kiva Eiger's kasha. Why do we need a psak here? The Aruch LaNer says either in our Gemara to know that if she grabs, we'll take it away from her, or just to understand the rationale. Okay, second offering. We're going to focus on a statement on Mem Beis Amud Beis. And that is, Rabbi Yochanan is purported to have said the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that if there's no concern that she's pregnant, you don't have to wait 3 months. And then Rabbi Chia bar Abba said Rabbi Yochanan retracted. Why? Because of a Mishnah in Karen B'Yavna that apparently the Chachamim argue on Rabbi Yossi. And then Rabbi Yirmiyah told Rabbi Zrika to ask Rabbi Yavahu, how could Rabbi Yochanan have said halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yochanan holds halacha kistam Mishnah. That's a klal of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan holds halacha kistam Mishnah, and the first Tana of our Mishnah is a stam Tana, and he says you always have to wait 3 months. So the second offering is, we're going to ask a stira in the words of Rabbi Yochanan, and this comes from a humble sefer called Elokad Meir Anini. It's in the back of the sefer, the Nispachim, and that is the following kasha. That the Gemara says, Hevenu la'el, this is something that we brought, the klal that the Gemara mentions, it's a klal in Erevin Memvava Mebez. Who is the halacha? If you machlokes Tanam, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Yossi, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Ve'ein tzarich lomer Rabbi Meir v'Rabbi Yossi, halacha Rabbi Yossi, hashem makam Rabbi Yehuda, lasa makam Rabbi Yossi mibai. In other words, if you have machlokes from Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, halacha Rabbi Yossi. And obviously, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir, halacha Rabbi Yossi. Because if Rabbi Meir is nothing in the face of Rabbi Yehuda, certainly he's not reckoned with in the face of Rabbi Yossi. So in other words, there's a klal in Shas that when Rabbi Meir argues with his friends, we don't have paskin like Rabbi Meir. And the reason is, we've said many times, the Gemara in Erevin Yud Gimel Beis, Amar Rav Acha bar Chanina, it's revealed and known before the one who spoke in the world came into being, that there was no one as great as Rabbi Meir in his generation. Why did they not establish halacha like him? Because his friends could not plummet the depth of his wisdom, right? By the way, I'll share with you, on Shabbos I have the following chiddush in Reb Meir. I never spoke about this, but here's the first opportunity. Rebbe said, the reason I'm sharper than my friends is because I saw Reb Meir from behind. If I would have seen him from the front, I would have been even sharper. So all of a sudden it struck me that this is exactly reminiscent of what the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe Rabbeinu, V'ra'isa es achorai ufanai lo yera'u. So last night I was very happy with this discovery. Does anyone make the connection between the fact that Moshe only saw the back of Hashem, he didn't see the front, and Rebbe only saw the back of Rameir? So Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, in a haskama to someone's biography on his father, Rav Avadia, he says both of these are expressions. The expression is, to see someone from behind is you only see them from the outside. So see them from the front means you understand their pnimius. And the point is, Rebbeinu Shalom saying to Moshe, you see how I'm manifest, but you don't really understand my essence. The same thing Rebbe said about Reb Meir. I only saw Reb Meir's external actions, but I didn't really know the real pneumius of Reb Meir. And Rabbi Yitzchak applied that to his father, Rabbi Vadia, who, you should come to my office. I got a new beautiful picture of Rabbi Vadia. The only thing is, it's not behind me, it's in front of me now. Anyway, maybe I'll show you after the share. But he said the same thing about Rabbi Vadia. People only saw him on the outside, but his pneumius was beyond... anyway, that's the bottom line. The bottom line is we don't paskin like Reb Meir. So what does it have to do with Yevamos? Watch this. The kasha, because we find in Shas, it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, Pei Vav Amud Aleph, and in many other places, Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. Meaning that Pashtus is when Rebbe brings a memra in the Mishnah without mentioning the name of the Tana, this Mishnah is going like the Shita Reb Meir. Yeah? That's what it means, Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. Now, the Rebbe brings an opinion, he doesn't say who it is, it's presumably Reb Meir. Now, the question is, since Mistama, the halacha is not like Reb Meir, why would Rebbe be soisem all of the Mishnayos shaloi aliba de hilchosai? I mean, what's going on here? If we never paskin like Reb Meir, why would Rebbe make it that unspecified statements in the Mishnah are going keneged the halacha? However, Rav Avigdor Miller Zechazak Levracha in his Sefer Am Segula, which is one second. The name of the Sefer in English is Exalted People. Exalted People. Rav Miller asked the stira bringing in this Gemara in Yevamos. Why? Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. Yeah? Rabbi Yochanan holds Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. And Rabbi Yochanan holds Halacha Kistam Mishnah. That's our Gemara in Yevamos. Now, Rav Miller quotes it from Shabbos. But it's not unanimous. We're going to see in the third segment of Klalim and Shas, not everybody holds Halacha Kistam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan is the one who said Halacha Kistam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan is also the one who says Halacha Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. Koloimer Stam Mishnah Hidas Harayv. Ma'efa hakavana kasher oimrim ki Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. In other words, Rav Miller is asking the following stira. That Rabbi Yochanan is soiser himself. He's the one who says Halacha Kistam Mishnah like we have in Yevamos. That means the Stam Mishnah is the Shita of the Rabbim, and therefore the Halacha is Kamaisam. And on the other hand, Rabbi Yochanan holds Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. So how could you reconcile Stam Mishnah Reb Meir and Halacha Kistam Mishnah if we never paskin like Rav Meir? So basically, Rav Miller says that this requires a fundamental yediyah in Klalei Hashas. Namely, when we say Stam Mishnah Reb Meir, it does not mean when Rebbe wrote a Mishnah without saying who it is. That's the personal opinion of Reb Meir. That is not the personal opinion of Reb Meir. Instead, we once spoke about that Rebbe did not write the Mishnah. Rebbe codified the Mishnah, which means he took all the earlier manuscripts of Torah Shabbat Peh and he condensed it. Now, there were many, many versions of the oral tradition. You had Reb Meir's version. All the Tanoim had different versions. Which Tana had the most accurate version of the oral tradition? Reb Meir had the most accurate tradition of the most accurate version of the oral tradition. In other words, when Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai, he gave us a luchos, he gave us the Sefer Torah, and he gave us the oral traditions. Which Tana had the most accurate preservation of the oral tradition? Rav Meir. However, this does not mean this was not Rav Meir's personal opinion. This was Rav Meir's version of the main Messiah and body of oral law that was passed down from generation to generation. When Rav Meir is saying his personal opinion, we never paskin like him. Stam Mishnah Rav Meir means when Rebbe codified the words of the oral law, whose words did he use? He used Rav Meir's words. Rav Meir had the most accurate version of the oral tradition. However, when Reb Meir was enunciating his own opinion, we don't paskin like him. By the way, this might explain another statement that we've had recently, where the Gemara says, we had this on Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, and we had this on Mem Amud Beis. Kan Shana Rebbe, Achos Grusha Midivei Torah, Achos Chalutza Midivei Sefer. Remember that? Kan Shana Rebbe. Here Rebbe taught. What do you mean here Rebbe taught? What does that mean? Kan Shana Rebbe. As opposed to all the other statements of Rebbe, which are Rebbe codifying the version of oral law that came from others. Kan Shana Rebbe, this was Rebbe's own teaching. Which, by the way, may explain the Lashon. We once gave a shiur on this, Al Pi Drush. Rebbe very often in Mishnayos says, Rebbe Omer, Omer Ani. Rebbe Omer, Omer Ani. What do you mean Omer Ani? Who else is saying it? The answer is Rebbe was the redactor of the Mishnah. So he has to say, by the way, this is my personal opinion, as opposed to codifying what somebody else says. So Rav Miller says like this. Let me make this a little bigger. He says like this. He says, Ein l'shagois b'inyan chasimas ha-Mishnah. Don't mistakenly think in the sealing of the Mishnah that hoisa zuhu aricha sofer shal Mishnah, that this was the final arrangement of the Mishnah. Guf ha-Mishnah yikara yekayim k'mad kula b'tzura nechachas min azmanim ha-koidmin b'yoyser. You should know that the body of the Mishnah was existent from the earliest of times. Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, asher li yeshivasei ba Rebbe levuda es gersais ha-Mishnah ha-nechochos. I don't know what that means even. I don't know, maybe this is a mistake. Amar ki ha-gersa shaloi shal Mishnah mesuyames. Haisa shoina b'nekuda shules mizeh shal gersa oisa lamed Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilah me'aver asher give us a Mishnah Rabbi ben Horkinus ki Rabbi ben Horkinus give us a Mishnah mekars v'shemus min hadar hakoidem k'fi sherab Rabbi Yechon zayin kil meham v'shama asher b'toyram kiblu mishnah of time ad limei ha'uma hakaduma b'yoyser. Says Rav Miller that the main body of the Mishnah existed many doiros prior to when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi came along and codified it. Nimsa shekishaoimrim sherebi kasam mishnayos. Then it comes out when we say Rebbe wrote the Mishnayos. Eina kavanah sherebi chidesh es nusach ha-Mishnayos v'hatoichen sham. It does not mean Rebbe innovated the language of the Mishnah and the content. Ela Mishnah is masor b'yadei midor dor. The Mishnah was given over from generation to generation. Rak shinuyim kalim b'masaras ha-Mishnah. There were small discrepancies in the text of the Mishnah ben chachmei doiresh Rebbe, between the various sages, and Rebbe, in his great wisdom, he was machriya which gersa was correct. Therefore, says Rav Miller, when we say stam Mishnah nemra al yidei Rav Meir, this doesn't mean this was the personal opinion of Rav Meir as opposed to the Rav. It just means the same way Rebbe dealt with extant versions of the Mishnah, so did Rav Meir. Hakavanahi, when we say Stam Mishnah Rav Meir, it does not mean this is Rav Meir's personal opinion. Raki Girsas HaMishnah Shamer Kifi Shekibla Mikaidim Ha'isa Girsa Oisa Imsu B'Marbis HaMikram Rebbe Vasifasai. That means the text that Rabbi Meir had in his possession was the primary text that Rebbe used in his formation of the Mishnah when they sat down to codify. Ein lekach davrim deyosef Rav Meir has nothing to do with Rav Meir's opinion. But rather it was Rav Meir's tradition from what he received from earlier generations. V'hainu, so we conclude as follows. She'ena kavana b'ma she'amru stam Mishnah Rav Meir. When we say stam Mishnah Rav Meir, it does not mean that a Mishnah, that it doesn't say the name of the Tana, was the Shita of Rav Meir. It means that each Tana had in his possession a different nusach, and when Rebbe came to choose which gersa is correct, most of the time he used the lashon that Rav Meir preserved. But when Rebbe brings a statement in the name of Rav Meir, he's bringing Rav Meir's personal opinion, and we don't follow Rav Meir's personal opinion. Okay, So that's another important yediyah. So yediyah number one, Rav Acha v'Ravina halacha k'divrei hamekel. Yediyah number two, Rabbi Yochanan says halacha k'stam mishnah. Where does Rabbi Yochanan say that? In Shabbos, also in Yevamos. Rabbi Yochanan has another statement. Rabbi Yochanan says stam mishnah Rabbi Meir. Where does he say that? That he says in Sanhedrin. But what he says in Yevamos is halacha k'stam mishnah. Now, is that unanimously held? Does everybody agree halacha k'stam mishnah? And that is the third offering today, which Rabbi Kiva Eger in the Gilyon Hashas says we should look in the Chidushei Harashba in Baba Kama. Let's review the klalim from the end of the page on Mem Beis Amud Beis. The Gemara said that Rabbi Yirmiyah told Rabbi Zrika, when you go to Rabbi Yavahu, by the way, another important yediyah is Rabbi Yavahu was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Yirmiyah tells Rabbi Zrika, when you go to Rabbi Yavahu, ask him, how could Rabbi Yochanan have said halacha Rabbi Yosi, but Rabbi Yochanan says halacha k'stam mishnah? And basically Rabbi Zrika said to Rabbi Yirmiyah, whoever you're dealing with doesn't know what he's talking about, because it's a stam v'yachar kach machloikes, ein halacha k'stam mishnah. Because Rav Yochanan says, machloikes v'yachar kach stam halacha k'stam, stam v'yachar kach machloikes, ein halacha k'stam. And then the Gemara brings as follows, that Rabbi Yavohu was leaning on the shoulder of Rab Nachum, his attendant, and Rab Nachum was gleaning halachas from him. He asked Rabbi Yavohu, what's halacha machloikes v'yachar kach stam? Halacha k'stam. Stam v'yachar kach machloikes, ein halacha k'stam. Stam of a Mishnah machloikes bebraisa, halacha is like the stam Mishnah. Machloikes in the Mishnah, stam bebraisa, we don't care what it says in the braisa. The braisa is not important. Okay. So I thought that what our Gemara says is unanimously held. Comes the Rashba and Baba Kama, Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis. There the Gemara said that Rabbi Yehuda said a statement, and in Amoira said halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says that Rav Huna got very angry when in Amoira said halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, because it's obvious that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, because there's a machloikes v'yachar kach stam and halacha k'stam. So the Rashba asks, why is the Gemara only asking from the fact that it's a stam, it's a machloikes v'yachar kach stam? There happens to be elsewhere another stam Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda. Isn't that enough of a reason for the halacha to be like Rabbi Yehuda? V'im toimer mai kosha umi adif machloikes v'yachar stam mistam masnisin teleka machloikes b'masnisin. There's no machloikes in the Mishnah. Paskinan ketanoi de braisa de pligi astam masnisin. V'lo yakshinon v'haloi stam Mishnahu. In other words, why are we asking machloikes v'yachar kach stam and Rabbi Yochanan holds halacha k'stam? Why don't we ask that? Forget about that. There happens to be elsewhere a stam Mishnah. So how do we ignore the stam Mishnah? And we follow the Tanoim of the Braisa. Why don't we say it's a stam Mishnah? Da'afilu Rabbi Yochanan nami amrina b'duchta tuva amoroi ninu v'aliba de Rabbi Yochanan. Basically, what the Raja wants to know is, why are we only asking from the shita of Rabbi Yochanan of machloikes v'yachar kach stam? Why don't we ask from the fact that there's a stam Mishnah? So the Raja says as follows. Machloikes v'yachar kach stam is more indicative that the halacha is like the stam than if we just had elsewhere a stam Mishnah. Why? V'yesh lomer deina chanami the tvei adav machloikes v'yachar kach stam mistam masnisin b'loy machloikes to masnisin. Why? Mishum dechol sheshana Rebbe machloikes. If Rebbe taught a machloikes v'yachar kach stam, that means Rebbe was medaktik very carefully in the matter, and his conclusion is stam. V'achar sheshana machlokes ra divrei ha'echad v'sasam kamaisai. But the fact that, says the Rashba, we have a stam mishnah and a brisa later that brings the machlokes, we don't necessarily have to follow the stam mishnah. The Rashba is saying, if you have a machlokes in mishnayos followed by a stam, that is the strongest proof that the halacha is that way, because that means Rebbe was aware of both opinions, and then he formulated the halacha like the stam. But if you have a stam in a mishnah and a machlokes in a brisa, we don't have to follow the stam mishnah. And furthermore, says the Rashba, v'oidev shaloimar shehabrisa nishnas achar mishnah debei Reb Chia. The brisos were taught after the mishnah was taught in the academy of Reb Chia and the academy of Rabbi Shia, who were the students of Rav, and they came after the mishnah. V'hokach Afa gav the ikastam b'masnisin sheshana Rebbe shana lehem Rebbe abraisa levasoy v'aleistam yachang machlokes v'chiha loy makshina v'stam masnisni d'afshad alav achiyu. Says the Rashba, if you have a stam in a mishnah and a machlokes in a brisa, we don't have to follow the stam mishnah. You know why? Because the brisa came later, and maybe they realized that there's another viewpoint. By the way, that's exactly opposite from our Gemara. Our Gemara says if you have a stam mishnah and you have a machlokes in the brisa, of course you're going to follow the stam mishnah. And the Rashba says no. Stam mishnah, machlokes in the brisa, we don't follow the mishnah necessarily. But now the Rashba asks, but wait a second, what happened to the Gemara in Yevamos? Men beza mid beza lo de kasha. The perga choyel zamrina and mistamach v'azu Rabbi Yavo kisid Rab Nachum shamei. It says Rabbi Yavo was leaning on the shoulders of Rab Nachum, his attendant. Uminkad hilchos and he was gleaning halachos from him. Machlokes v'achar kach stam, halacha kestam. Stam v'achar kach machlokes, ein halacha kestam. Stam b'masnis machlokes b'braisa, halacha kestam. Stam b'braisa, machlokes b'masnisin. He says, Rebbe didn't teach it. Reb Chia, where did he get it from? Says the Raja, I just said stam in the Mishnah, machlokes in the Brisa. We don't paskin like the stam. And yet, the Gemara in Yevamos Membeis Amabes says, stam b'masnisin machlokes b'Brisa. We do paskin like the stam. Alma af stam b'masnisin machlokes b'Brisa. Pshita le shalach stam b'masnisin. So we have a machlokes between Baba Kama, Kof Beis Amad Beis, and Yevamos Mem Beis Amad Beis. In Baba Kama, it says if you have a stam mishnah followed by a machlokes in the brisa, we don't have to follow paskin like the stam mishnah. And in Yevamos, it says if you have a stam mishnah followed by a machlokes in the brisa, you do have to paskin like the stam mishnah. Says the Raja, it's not a stira. I'm right. If you have a stam mishnah and a machlokes in the brisa, you don't have to paskin like the stam mishnah because the brisa was taught later. The Gemara in Yevamos is talking in the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is a das yachid. He holds if you have a stam mishnah followed by a brisa, you have to follow the stam mishnah. That's Rabbi Yochanan's Shita. But it's Rabbi Avohu. Rabbi Avohu was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Raj Rabbi Yeshamar hu klala Rabbi Avu b'lchudu dekaileh. That's Rabbi Avohu's rule. V'amaroy achrinu lesulachin. Other Amoram don't hold that way. B'stam asnis machlokes brisa. Teha'ika tuva de paskil itim b'machlokes de brisa. There are many times we paskin not like the stam mishnah, but rather like the machlokes and the brisa. Who doesn't? Chutz me Rabbi Yochanan. Va'aliba dahanu amaroi da'amrin mishmed Rabbi Yochanan da'halacha kistam mishnah. Except Rabbi Yochanan and those Amoraim who said the name Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Avo was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. He holds like his Rebbe. So in other words, beware. And this is what Rabbi Kiva Eger is mitzayin on the side of the Gemara. That when our Gemara says stam mishnah machlokes in the brisa, that is not unanimously held. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and all who subscribe to his opinion. However, it is muchach in the Gemara in Baba Kama that stoma de Shas holds that since Brisas came after the Mishnah, is stam, in other words, like this. A machloikis in the Mishnah followed by a stam Mishnah, the halacha is going to be like the stam Mishnah. Why? Because that means Rebbe was aware of the various opinions, he looked into it, and he codified halacha kastam Mishnah. But if Rebbe just wrote a stam Mishnah, and then later on there's a machlokes in the Brisa. The same way, if later on there's a machlokes in the Mishnah, we're not going to follow the Stam Mishnah. If there's a machlokes in the Brisa, so Rabbi Yochanan holds, no, halacha kistam Mishnah. But all the other Amoraim and Stama the Shas would say, you don't have to follow the Stam Mishnah. So these are three klalim of Shas that we learned today. Number one, Rav Acha and Ravina, halacha kedivrei hamekel. And therefore, if the Gemara says hilchasa, you're entitled to ask, what do I need that for? We already know that. Number two, Rabbi Yochanan holds Stam Mishnah Rav Meir, and Rabbi Yochanan holds halacha kistam Mishnah, but we know that halacha is not like Rav Meir, so we learned Stam Mishnah Rav Meir means Stam Mishnah are the words of Rav Meir's version of the Mishnah, but not Rav Meir's personal opinion. And then, regarding a Stam Mishnah and a machlokes and a Brisa, it's a machlokes between Yevamos Mem Beis Amud Beis and Baba Kama Kuf Beis Amud Beis. Okay, Rabbi Isai, have a great day. Thanks for joining. This was a little bit of a different kind of Iyun share, but equally as important. And Bezos Hashem, Monday morning is a Agra de Pirka at 10:30, and there's a special Agra de Pirka national share at, I believe, 12 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. Okay, Rabbi Isai, have a great day. Shkach. Kol Tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.